Welcome back, trippers, to another episode of Tripping Through Transformation. This is episode 14. I've been away for a little while. Thought I'd take some time to prioritize some things in my life and revamp a couple things on the show. Today's topic is going to be resilience. I've got a great guest coming on. Is Randy Chevrier. He's a former CFL and NFL football star. He's going to discuss how a stabbing cemented his resolve to moving forward with his football career. You know, he had reached a point in his life where he was kind of having doubts if he should stick with it. He got stabbed, and that was it. He decided, no, I'm going to take this as far as I can and do the best that I can. So stick around for that. And at the end of the interview, I also want to share a couple clips with you. I've got Andrew Huberman talking about the Anterior Mid-Singulate Cortex, what he calls the source of willpower in humans, and how you can basically strengthen your own willpower. I'm going to share a bit of a TED talk from Rick Doblin discussing psychedelics and how psychedelics are helping people with PTSD, anxiety, alcoholism, all these things. And then I'm going to wrap up with a brief video of Michael Caine explaining how to best use the difficulty and overcoming obstacles. So stick around and balance, drop the beat.
Balance makes it bang.
All right, man. Well, Randy, welcome on the show.
Hey, Guillaume, thanks for having me, man. It's been a long time coming. I'm a big fan of the work you do. I know we didn't lose touch, but like everyone gets busy and things happen, and and a few weeks ago it was nice to reconnect with you on that creator call that we had, and for me, just to give you the encouragement to keep doing the thing you do in your niche, man. I'm a big fan of what you do, man, and I know that there's people that love what you do, just like there's people that love what I do. And I'm really honored to be on your show with you, man. I think you're a real champ, man. And I'm glad to be sharing some time with you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like you said, we've known each other for a little while, but I think it's the first time we've actually sat down face to face and had a conversation. And thank you so much. I know you gave me a shout out on your show once, and that was great. So I appreciate that. You've definitely been a big source of strength and support for me. So
yeah, no, man. Anything.
And today we're going to talk about resilience and overcoming challenges. And I think, supporting one another is definitely a big step in that. So thank you.
Absolutely. We came together, right, as a community of guys trying to help guys. And we were on a network, we're off a network, but you know what? The community is still there. And guys wanting to help guys is still there. And it's a matter of just keeping those connections alive and nurturing them as best we can. Some of us, like myself, I would love to be even more connected, but life and circumstance get in the way. But you do it. I always even tell my kids, I say, for my boys, I have 3 boys, and I say, boys, my role as a father is to be there for you guys and do what I can for you when I can for you. And even sometimes when I can't, I do for you. And that's what I think it is. But you can't stretch yourself so thin that you wind up suffering, but you do your best. And I think our little community, guys like you, Rubio, AC, Jodis, a bunch of guys with all the different podcasts, Doc and MD and the Chef, like all good people helping each other when they can. And so I'm really, really happy to do this with you today, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. And we definitely have a great group of support. I know, like, I've known a lot of these guys for a few years, and they've always been there to support me. Like you named Rubio, Jodis. Yeah, those guys have their shows and they've got their own things. But if I need something from them, I can reach out, and, I know they're going to be there to support me. And we've got that. And it's so important. I think a lot of people don't have that.
So, yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I know, like you were just saying, it's important to keep touch. And this is something that's new to me, is having so much support now, to the point where I'm like, oh man, like I'm not used to having so many people in my life. So it can be challenging to be there, but
but the people, that's the thing. The people that accept you, they're there no matter what. They're kind of like family, right? Like I just came back from Montreal, both of us French Canadians. I went back to my roots this week. I went to visit my sister, right? And my sister suffered a terrible tragedy over the winter. Her husband passed away. She's been dealing with that for the last 7 months. And I live so far away. I live in Calgary, right? Like there's not much I can do for her except I call her when I can. I call her like, almost every second day, just check on her. But I don't know her business affairs. I don't know all the nitty gritty of what she's going through. But I jumped on a plane. I went there, and just being there as her brother for her mattered, right? And that's what I think we have. Like you said, we haven't chatted a ton, but every once in a while we get on, we send a couple of messages, and we it's quality. It's not quantity, right? There's friends that are there for the good times, right? There's people that are there for all the good times. Then when the bad times show up, they disappear. And there's also friends that show up in seasons of your life. There's friends that show up for reasons. But then there's people that are just there that you could send a message in the middle of the night and they'll answer because they're probably up to. And I got a bunch of those guys in my life. You got a bunch of those guys in your life. And interconnected, we have a lot of guys in our lives like that. And so the challenge is making sure everyone knows they do have people like that, because when we see people suffering from mental health issues, and we talk about suicide and all the things that plague middle-aged men from their 30s onward, it's that feeling of like, I'm in this alone. I got nobody. It's funny, like I'm a very social guy. You look at my, like I played professional sports. I was a teacher. I'm in the fire department. God, like I know so many people, but true friends, I don't really have. Like I have some people that I keep close. But last week, I remember when I was going to the airport, my one buddy that I usually rely on to give me a lift to the airport, he couldn't do it. And I was like, man, who else can I call? And I thought about it. I was like, well, I really didn't feel comfortable that I can call many people. And I had to really sit down and think. And then there was another buddy I called that's a friend of my friend, but he wasn't really my original friend, but this guy showed up. And I think there was a moment there that I was thinking, like, do I have anyone? Is this what it is? If one person can't be there for me, am I alone? But no, there are people that want to be there for you. The big thing is, one, you got to be willing to ask. And that was a hard thing for me to ask that I didn't think, and this is a stupid thing like a lift to the airport. But in life, when you're going through challenges and struggles, to have the courage to tell someone, hey man, listen, I might need a hand. Like I might not even need a hand. I might need you just to listen. And sometimes that's all people need, right? So I think the challenge for us as connectors is making sure that people know that we're there for them when we can be, but also there are people there for them that are just like family that will be there no matter what. Like, I got two brothers, and my brothers, like we're not super close. We don't talk every day, but shoot, if something happened, I'd be there for them, right? And I think that's what we're doing. And for me, again, I come back to, we had that conversation the other day, and I saw that you hadn't put out a show in a while. I was like, man, you got to keep doing your thing. Like, you're good at what you do. You got the best setup in all of podcast history right behind you. I love the setup.
Yeah.
Like you should keep doing this. Like, and so that's what this is about for me. I just love meeting people. I was going to start telling you this off air, but so here I am. I'm sitting at home, and I came back yesterday afternoon, but I had been fevering while I was home, and I got sick. So this morning I had to get up for work, and I woke up. I was like, man, I can't do this. I can't go to work. I'm fevering. I'm sick. I got congestion. So I called in sick, and I never call in sick. And I work a job that I can actually work from home. So even if I'm not feeling well, if I get a migraine, I could sit on my computer and I could work. Like I work as a community safety officer with the fire department. So I go do in-person stuff, but I can work from home too. Like I got lots of administrative work. I could have done that all day, but I was really not feeling it. So I told everyone, I said, I'm off. I worked actually for a couple hours, and then I was like, my kids are with their mother. Like, we're separated, so they spend time with their mother, and they've been on vacation. My girlfriend lives in Red Deer, which is an hour and a half away, and she just went home after our trip to Montreal. So here I am sitting alone. Man, I'm going stir crazy. I don't know what to do when I'm by myself. I read a book, I got ADD. I last 5 minutes. Watch TV, I can't even pick a show. So here I am just freaking out, and I know that I'm going to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to it, because for me, I love physical activity. That's one thing I love. But I love connection. Like, and you're like, oh, you have the energy to talk to. Yeah, because this is what I love. Yeah, I might be a little dry, I might be a little hoarse, but I'm excited to talk with you, man.
That's great because I love listening, and I'm so happy that you're a good talker, man. It's gonna
Yeah,
make it
no.
a lot easier for me. But no, I love having people on and just kind of taking in their messages or whatever they're here to share, whether it's their expertise, their whatever. So I know you said you came on and you want to talk about resilience and whatnot. So I don't know if you want to get into that, but
Wherever you want to go, man, I'm all yours. I know you had a little bit of a plan, so if you want to kick it off with, however, I told you a couple of things that, obviously I'm with the fire department. I played football. I grew up in Montreal. We both share that Quebec connection. The poutine and the Labatt 50 and the Expos.
yeah,
so
yeah.
so whatever you want to talk about, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I did want to kind of touch on growing up because I'm guessing you were born in Quebec. Were you born in
Yeah.
Quebec?
Yeah. So I was born in Montreal. I was born in Saint Leonard, which is a little borough in Montreal, and it's known for its Italian population. It's one of the largest Italian immigrant populations in Montreal is in Saint Leonard. And that's where I grew up. So I went to a school, public school, Laurier McDonald on Vio and Jean Talon. This is how rough my school was. We were like my high school was like blue collar, like Italian blue collar. Think about every kid's dad was a plumber, a bricklayer, electrician, a construction guy. And my high school was like right off a highway across the street, like literally across the street from a strip joint. Like I don't even know if that's allowed in the world. Like I think there's zoning laws where you can't have a strip. Like this was like a male and female strip joint across the street from the high school. That's like that was my neighborhood. So just
Wow.
so you know. And then the church was like 2 blocks over because you had to go pray on Sundays, right?
Yeah, you got to
That's
pray for your sins. You're coming across the street.
but that's where I grew up. And so it's funny because like my last name is Chevrier, which is
Yeah.
French Canadian. My dad was French Canadian. My mom was Italian. My mom was an immigrant from Italy. She came over when she was 14. And you talk about resilience. My mom, my grandmother, and my aunt came over from Italy in a boat. They joined my grandfather, who was here for 2 years doing construction.
Mm.
And a year and a half after they arrived, he dies.
Wow.
And they don't go back to Italy. They don't go back to Italy because my grandmother has 6 brothers that are all in construction here. So my mom and my aunt had to drop out of school so that every day they could do the laundry and make the meals for the uncles that went to work. And my grandmother worked as a seamstress. You talk about resilience, those
Yeah.
days coming back, and we see it now. I mean, we see it now with immigrants coming from different parts of the world. The stuff we judge them on the surface. The internet judges people coming over from Syria and Ukraine, all these people, this. But when you grew up in that environment where people had to come and they had to hustle in that type of way to survive, to make the life where the son can go on and play professional football, where the son can become a firefighter and serve his community, man, that's resilience beyond any resilience that I could go through. So, I saw that early growing up, that type of sacrifice people make and dealing with what life throws at you. My mom's dream wasn't to come on a boat and wash clothes on a washboard and not finish high school. That wasn't her dream. My mom was beautiful. She was actually a model, but she had to quit modeling because she had to do all this stuff. And that's life, right? So my upbringing, my mom married a French Canadian guy. Here's another resilience thing. Imagine that, the intercultural thing. You come over in Italy. The Italians were the worst the Italians were the worst common denominator coming over after the war, right? They're the wops that everyone would call them. Whatever type of terrible names they were called, they were seen as third-class citizens. And my dad, a French Canadian, marries an Italian. Well, you can imagine in his community how it looked, but you can also imagine in her community how it looked. And here they are. It wasn't it wasn't what people would classify as an interracial relationship, but it was an intercultural relationship that didn't happen very often. And like growing up, my dad, he learned Italian at the age of 19. He's a English French Canadian, learned Italian. He absorbed Italian culture, and that's how I was raised. We were raised as Italians. But the funny thing is, my mom named me Randy. Like like I went to high school, everybody's name was Lino, Nino, Tino, Dino, Pino, Tony, and Joe. And then you got 6 foot tall Randy in the back of the line, right? Like, so high school was interesting for me, but it was awesome. Like, I was one of those guys that got along with a lot of people, and I was very active. I loved sports. I had a few close friends. One of my friends still from kindergarten, I still talk to him. Some of them from what is it? I guess they call it grade 7, secondary 1. I still have some of my friends from this day. I still chat with them. You know, we thank God for technology, but yeah, like it was a hard upbringing. Like I didn't have all the things. I had a paper route when I was 10. You know, I had 2 paper routes when I was 14. I assumed my brothers. I was passing the Montreal Gazette and the Journal de Montréal, one strap on one arm, one on the other.
Yeah.
And then when I was 15, I got my first job at a bus garage, and I had to clean toilets of buses and do all the crappiest job you can ever do in your life. That was my first job. Like I didn't even know I was going to work. My dad brought me to work one day, and he told the guy who owned the bus garage, "My son needs a job." I was like, "What? I need a job?" And the guy's like, "Okay," gave me a broom, and my dad left. And I didn't even have a lunch, had nothing, man. I swept the whole garage. I was putting hoses down. Like these buses were coming up to Montreal from Mexico, and I'm putting a hose down. The guys that would send me in the bus because I was the 14-year-old kid, and I'm cleaning out these stinky buses. And I did that for 2-3 years. Like that. That's what I know of growing up. You know, it was hard. It wasn't easy.
I laugh just because I also was a paper boy. I used to do the Fort McMurray Today and the Edmonton Sun, and the same thing. I used to work for Diversify, cleaning the buses. Man, you pull the plug, the crap comes out, it's splashing everywhere.
Man, no one ever knew and if they don't park it right over the trap, like it splashes on you. Like
sometimes guys will put like trash in there, and then you gotta.
You got oh man, it was disgusting. And then I worked in the paint shop too, and there was no like PPE, there was no specialized masks, and they made us like they would buy old buses or buses that crashed, and they would fix them up, and we'd have to strip the paint. We used this paint thinner stuff that was like I don't know what kind of grade it was, but it was like stuff that burned your skin off, and it was like you're a 14-year-old kid, you're painting it on, and you're scraping. But that was life back then. That was life in the 80s and the 90s. Like, you know, you just did stuff and you didn't complain. And you know, it was tough, but it was good. Like, I'm so grateful for that because I mean, you know, I learned how to work hard, and I learned, you know, not to complain. But I also learned that if you don't like something, well, work hard so you can do something else, you know?
100%, yeah.
So I think, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I think that paperboy job, man, especially in Northern Alberta, was the toughest job I ever had as a 13-year-old. I'd be coming home and I just have frozen snot, and my eyebrows and my eyelashes were frozen. But
you know what I hated? You know what I hated? You know what I hated was collecting the money. Did you have to do that?
Worse, people don't have $2. You don't
have the money. I was the best. You know why I was the best paperboy? This is why I was the best paperboy. I would go collect the money. And then once I had enough money, because they give you tips, right? Like, let's say they owe you 15, they give you a 20. Okay, I got $5, and I got this, and you go to people's house. Oh, I'll come back tomorrow night. You come back tomorrow. Oh, I'll come back tomorrow night. I gave people 3 chances, and then after that, maybe I'm a bad businessman, but once I had enough to pay the guy that gives us the papers, once I had enough to pay him, I was good. I never went back to people's house until the next month because I hated going out. I didn't mind passing the papers, but after school, that's my time. And these people, I mean, now it's probably so easy to be a paper boy. You probably don't even have to touch the money. You just have to throw the papers at the doors now.
I remember I had a little booklet, and every time they'd pay, I'd have to like tear a coupon and give them as proof of purchase. Yeah, you paid for this week and this week. Yeah, it was a pain in the ass, man. Some people, they would let those pile up. Yeah. So you grew up French Italian. So what were you speaking at home? Like both languages, or?
So my first language was Italian, actually, because my grandmother lived with us, and she only spoke Italian. So I went to Italian church on Sundays. I worked at the Italian grocery store down the street when I was like the bus job was my Saturday, Sunday job. And during the week after school, I would go work at the grocery store. It was all Italian ladies. So my first real language was Italian, and then it was English. French, I learned on the streets. Even though we had a little bit of French in school, my French I was very sociable. So I didn't, growing up in Montreal in the 80s, you got to understand, there was a big rift between the English and the French. Everything was a fight. You know, if you went to English school, you fought with the kids at the French school. Like, we just didn't get along. But for me, I played with everyone. I got along with everyone. I think that was my my superpower, was I just, you know, I fit in, and I learned French on the streets, playing hockey, ball hockey with the kids that I met. Like I said, I loved sports, and as long as sports was being played, you can communicate with anyone. And I read the French newspaper because I love the Montreal Canadiens. So all the news came in the French newspaper. Like they did a great job. So I would always buy the French sports sections, and that's pretty much how I learned. Obviously, I'm sure I learned a bit in school, but I mean, in school, I just remember fooling around all the time. I don't really remember being good at all the French lessons and doing well. Like I wasn't a great student in school. So I mean, I know how I was in math. I can imagine I was exactly the same in French, and it wasn't very good. I was only good in English because English came very natural to me in terms of language and reading and writing. But yeah, so I learned my French on the street for sure. So that
Yeah,
French was my third language. A lot of people think, oh, whenever I come to Alberta, they're like, oh, you don't have a French accent. It's like they assume that you come from Montreal, that you speak French, or you're a French Canadian. It's like, no, I went to English school my entire life. You know, I actually fought French people. You know, like I had to put it up and fight in an alleyway to
yeah,
get home and to save my lunch money. You know.
yeah. Just well, it sounds like you were able to get along with everybody despite your language. Like, I guess not so much barriers, because it sounds like you were able to communicate with everybody, but your personality is kind of what allowed you to socialize and get along with people.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think that's accurate, is because I just tried, and that's one thing. When you go somewhere new, as long as you try, people respect it and they try back. And if you have that in common, and people read that on you, it's trying is a respect thing. If you try to understand someone before jumping on them, I find more doors open than close, and I think that's been the story of my life interacting with people.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's a little different for me because, I grew up, French was my first language, and then I moved to
Yeah,
Alberta. I don't speak a word of English. So I had like
yeah.
a big obstacle. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. There's definitely like hard. It was hard for me to fit in and get along with people because
Well,
of
I
that.
bet, because in Alberta, I mean, you're a super minority. Like in Montreal, at least in Montreal, growing up in the English, like Italian side of town where I grew up, there's you got pockets of English and pockets of French, and the English stay with the English, the French stay with the French. But you come to Alberta, French Canadian, I mean, there's a tiny pocket in Edmonton, and outside of Edmonton, where is it? What's it, Beaumont? There's a little French community, but
Yeah.
it's not. There's not enough people to back you up if you're in a corner in a high
And if
school,
I,
and I get that. I get that that would be tough. That would be tough because and again, I'm gonna call it like I see it. I moved here 20 years ago, but there's definitely an attitude towards French Canada from the West because they just don't know it and don't understand it. And I would actually venture to say that French Canadians, not English Canadians in Quebec, but French Canadians in Quebec are very much like English speakers in Alberta. They love country music, they love beer, and they love line dancing. I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't get more similar than that, but they think that they're so different and they're not.
Yeah. Well, even growing up, like I spoke French primarily, but we used a lot of English words when I
Oh
spoke.
yeah.
Like
Yep.
"Memwe deux toast dans le toaster," like stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so yeah.
You're gonna have to
Um,
put the captions there. The two toasts in the toaster.
Deux toast, passe-moi ton lighter, huh? Things like that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's get into football a little bit. So, like, at what point did you get into that? Like, was that a high school thing or?
Well, listen, so like I mentioned, I wasn't a very good student in high school. I didn't know, I was aimless. My sister was an amazing student. My brothers were very smart, but for me, I know I had ADD. Back then, nobody diagnosed ADHDs, but I know, like, listen, man, I couldn't pay attention if my life depended on it. And I sat at the back of the class all day. My brothers were really good artists, and they drew comic book stuff. They're not in the comic industry, but they had amazing talent. And I always wished I had their talent. So I would sit in the back of the class all day, and it didn't matter what class it was, and I would draw superheroes. And then
Yeah.
after school, I would play street hockey for 4 or 5 hours. That's all I did in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to go to the military. So my dream was to go. I watched too many war movies in the 80s. War movies were very, very popular. They romanticized the war movies. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to go. Me and my buddies, I thought I was going to go to the army. And me and my two best friends, after what was it, secondary five, grade 11, I think that's what it is
Yeah.
over there. We applied for the army, and I played hockey my whole life, but I wasn't a great not my whole life, but like I played ice hockey, but I was always like a house league player. I didn't have much talent, even though I dreamt of being with the Canadians. I wasn't making it anywhere in hockey. So I was going to join the army, and after high school, I put in the application. I did the paperwork for even my two buddies because I was so committed, and they got in, and I didn't get in. and my
Wow.
dream was crushed because that's all I thought I was going to do. I didn't study in school because I thought, oh, I'm going to go to the army to be a soldier. And I remember it was actually funny. The recruiter calls me up one day, and like, again, you got a picture. I'm a kid. I watch too many movies. You romanticize about going to be a soldier, right? Like this.
Rambo.
Yeah, whatever platoon, whatever movie it was romanticized back then, and maybe you're a kid, you influence, and here I am, want to be a soldier, want to serve my country, blah blah blah. And the recruiter calls me up. He's like, "Listen, man." He's like, "The last test I did was the medical. You do all these tests, aptitude, and same thing when I got in the fire department was the same thing. And the last test you do is the physical. And I have really bad eyesight. I have super bad eyesight. Like like if I take off my contacts or my glasses, like you can burn ants with my glasses in the sunlight, right? Uh the recruiter, he's like, "Listen, man," he's like, "You're not gonna be in to get you're not gonna get in to be a soldier." And that's all I heard. Like I heard you're not accepted. And then he started listing off some other jobs I can do. He's like, "But there's other jobs you can do." And the only thing I heard him say was, "You could be a cook." And he was laughing when he said that. And I'm telling you, man, it crushed me.
Mm.
It was such a punch in the balls because he's laughing, and this was like my dream. Like he crushed my dream, and he's like, "You could be a cook." And I'm like, "Man, if I want to be a cook, I could go to McDonald's and make more money, you know." And I left. In hindsight, as far as what I know about the military now, some of those jobs he probably offered me were really good careers that could have eventually become good careers, because military does train you, if you know that it's like firefighting. Everyone thinks firefighter, you join the fire department, you're a firefighter. Yeah, you start as that, but there are so many careers within the fire service that you can become. Like I'm currently doing a community safety officer, but I didn't know that as a kid. You think, oh, army, soldier, right? So anyhow, so I was crushed, and that's how I got into football. I had missed some hockey camps. Some of my buddies were playing football, and they said, "You should try football." And I was a tall, skinny kid. I didn't know anything about the sport. I knew nothing. I was 18 years old, and I tried it on. I played 4 games of midget football, and I was okay. And I made an all-star team. And then, it's kind of a long story, but the rest is history. I picked it up pretty quick after that, and yeah, I played 1 year, 1 full year of organized football before I went to university at McGill, and it was great because I wasn't a good student, and football focused me. It gave me like this laser focus. Like, hey, if I want to continue doing the sport that I really enjoy doing that I never heard of before, because I never even watched it on TV. Like I had 3 channels growing up. Like we didn't have cable. I
Yeah.
didn't watch it. I didn't watch NFL, and in the '80s there was no Montreal Alouettes. They left town, so there was no football for me.
Yeah.
But Italian kids loved football, and that's why some of my buddies told me I should play. So, anyways, I jumped in, and I said, if I want to continue playing this game, that's really fun, and I get to hit people without going to jail, I said, I better start sharpening up in school. And that's what I did. And I got into McGill, and I got into education. So I have an education degree from McGill, but it was football that gave me, it was like that sport gave me the catalyst to making good decisions and setting goals. Whereas before I was just kind of blowing in the wind.
Yeah. So I was asking you, because you were talking to me before we got on. You were saying that football almost didn't happen for you, right?
Oh yeah. So I mean, I played in university, and it was funny because I got to university, no one knew who I was. I didn't play since I was a kid, and I showed up, and I did well. I started playing, and I started doing well. And at first it was like, okay, this kid's okay. And then I started really setting goals. Like I didn't just want to be good at my school. I just didn't want to be better than the guy that I was competing for the job. I wanted to be the best in the country at what I did.
Right.
I set these goals, and I never set goals before in my life. And I made measurable goals. I set it, like I did the goals the way people are supposed to set goals when they tell you to set goals. And I did it just kind of on my own. Um, and about my 4th year at McGill, people started talking about, hey, this kid could play in the CFL. Like, I got big. I trained all clean. I know that's always a question I get, but I was always clean my entire life. And I got big, I got strong, I got fast, I got good. And I was like, well, why do I have to set my sights on the CFL? And you got to think McGill University is a university that produces like teachers, politicians, lawyers, doctors, heads of companies. Football is not the big thing coming out of McGill. Even though it's the oldest program in North America, most guys are there just for school. But I was there because I wanted to be a great football player, and I wanted a good education. And when people said CFL, I was like, well, why not NFL? And people were
Mm.
looking at me like, you crazy? Like, no one goes to the NFL from Canadian University, let alone McGill. Like, you got to understand where you're coming from. Like, what do
Yeah.
you know? I was like, well, I don't care what you're saying. Like, I'm going to do it. And I set it as my goal. And I was on my way, man. I was kicking ass, taking names, as they say.
Yeah.
In my 4th year, I was crushing it, dude. Like, I was like, man, I was after my 4th year, the CFL was ready to draft me, and I could have gone to the draft, but I decided to go back to McGill for a 5th year because I was like, I'm gonna have a great season, and I'm going to the NFL. And that summer, the summer before my 5th season, I picked up so in the summers, every summer while I was at McGill, I would work at a steel mill on the night shift. I was working in a steel mill. I'd come home in the morning. I'd go to sleep till 4 in the afternoon. I'd get up. I'd train. I'd eat. I'd do my stuff, and then I'd go to the steel mill for 11 o'clock at night. Start my shift. I did that every summer. But during the school year, after the season, I would work as a bouncer at the pubs at the school. I had a couple of dance clubs in Montreal. If you ever been to Montreal, ever heard of the Dome? I worked at the Dome. I worked at all kinds of clubs. Like, it was easy money. You stand at the door, the girls flirt with you, you get money. You go. It was easy. There was hardly ever any trouble. And I was working going into my 5th year. I said, I don't want to do the steel mill. I'm done with the steel mill. I want to focus on training, but I need a couple of bucks. I need a couple of bucks to get me through the summer. So I was working as a doorman at the Peel Pub. You ever heard of the Peel Pub? Did that exist when you were there?
I moved when I was 10 years old. I didn't know.
So you haven't been back. So the Peel Pub is a famous pub for piss warm beer and 9-cent wings, and all the college kids would go there, CJEP kids and all that. And I was working the door with my friend. And basically on the second week I worked there, I got stabbed. Long story short, but I got stabbed in the chest, and the knife came within inches of my liver. And I was told that I probably wouldn't play football. And the funny thing is that morning I was training. I always ran with the track team because I was a big guy. I was like 280 pounds, but I wanted to be fast. So I ran with all the fast guys. And I ran with the track team, and I was getting shin splints. I was in pain. And I had completed my degree, and I was really having this moment where I was on the field at McGill, and I was like, listen, I have my degree. For once in my life, I could actually go teach and make money. I was questioning my path. I was like, right now I could go apply to school board, have a real job, and make some money. And I won't feel this pain. I'm like, I train every day, 3-4 hours for like what amounts to there's only 10 games in the university season. There's about 6 seconds of all out effort every play. The amount that I trained for about 10 minutes in a total season of full out output, it's ridiculous. It's actually stupid.
So what was your position?
I was a defensive tackle. So when the ball snapped, I'm the guy that tries to sack the quarterback. And that time from the ball snap to the whistle blows, you're looking at about 7 seconds.
Yeah.
3 seconds of all out effort. And I'm like, I train 3 hours a day for this, and I'm in pain, and I wanted to quit. That day I wanted to quit. That night, the knife hits, and I was on St. Catherine Street, downtown Montreal, busy, 2 a.m. It was full of people. The paramedics put me on the ground. My lung deflated, and all I could think of is like, I got to get back. And it was tough. It was tough because everything I did to that point, I lost. I sat in a chair for, I think it was 2 weeks in the hospital, 5 weeks sitting in a chair, and I had 3 weeks after that. Like the doctor said, basically, I found the doctor that was willing to give me to not write me off, because everyone else is like, listen, you're not going to play football. You're not going to play football. But I found one doctor. He was an orthopedic surgeon, Dr. David Fleiser. He actually played at McGill and played in the CFL. And he said, listen, if you do these things, he gave me a protocol. He said, listen, if you don't do this and don't do this, and you sit down for basically 7 weeks, he's like, then you can get back to activity. So that's what I did. I did nothing for 7 weeks. After 7 weeks, man, I was like a shadow of what I was the night I got stabbed. I was like, I lost, I don't know, 40, 50 pounds. I lost all my strength. I was nothing. And I had 3 weeks to get ready for my season. 3 weeks. And when the doctors gave me the go-ahead, man, I was training like twice a day, 3 times a day sometimes. I bought memberships at different gyms so that I could make sure that no one saw me working out twice a day. And I came back 3 weeks
Why is that?
later.
Why didn't you want people to see that?
Because the doctor's like, hey, listen, you got to go easy. You can't rush into it. And I didn't want anyone to know that I was like training like a madman. So I would go train in the morning at McGill. And then in the afternoon, I would go to this gym down the street. It was like this muscle gym on St. Catherine Street called The Rock. I would go train there. And then I had a gym in St. Leonard that I would train at night. So
Okay.
I really committed myself to getting back to the shape I was the night step. I wasn't where I wanted to be for the season, but I was where I left off. And I came back, and man, the rest is history. I had a season, like I didn't think this was going to happen. I had a season, like I always say, like something intervened in my life because I'm not that lucky and I wasn't that good. And I wound up having like the most amazing season you could ever have. I was like, every time I was on the field, I was making tackles. Every time I touched the ball, like every time I was like, it's like I could feel the game like the Matrix. And at the end of that season, I was first team All Canadian, which is a big honor. I wound up becoming the lineman of the year in Canada. So of all the offensive and defensive linemen, I was the lineman of the year voted by all the coaches. And then I wound up getting invited to a U.S. college all-star game, the oldest U.S. college, like one of two Canadians invited to that game.
Yeah.
And like everything fell into place. And that moment when I'll never forget when I laid down on St. Catherine Street as blood was pouring out of my chest and my lungs, I just felt all I could think of is I got to get back. And that was that decision that I chose, that I'm going to get back. I could have stayed there forever. I could have been like, I could be talking to you now saying, oh man, I could have been a professional athlete, but that night I got stabbed. It ruined my life. Ruined my career. I couldn't get back at. Instead, I chose, and I chose hard, because getting back to the point where I could just play again was one of the toughest things I ever did. It was hard to sacrifice the easy stuff, the friends, the girlfriend. It was hard to cast out everyone saying, well, you're not going to make it to the NFL now. You definitely didn't make it before. You weren't going to make it before. Look at you now. Yeah. And I did. And I got, after that East-West Shrine game, the U.S. All-Star game, NFL teams saw me and they're like, who is this guy? I could snap a football. I could play defense. And I got drafted. I got drafted the following year by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And everyone was like, how did this happen? This guy from Canada, where's he coming from? You know, and I didn't play in the NFL as long as I would have liked to. Like, if I'm being totally honest, I think the game was a little bit bigger than me. I played in the NFL 1 year, went to Europe. I bounced around a few teams, Jacksonville, Dallas, Cincinnati, but I still had that experience. I still had something that even 99% of the Americans that are on the path to getting there never get. I played in the NFL. I played in 13 games. I was flying in on the charter jets and running down on kickoff and snapping I snapped the ball on a Monday Night Football overtime winner, Dallas Cowboys versus Washington. Like, I did some of the most amazing stuff for a guy that everyone was saying he couldn't make it. And then they added insult to injury by putting a knife in me and telling me, well, now you can't make it, you know? Yeah. So I really have a perspective, and I've passed through a threshold that sometimes I'll tell you, as a middle-aged man now, I have to remind myself. It was easier after that happened in my 20s and 30s to remind myself, hey, when I got cut by the Dallas Cowboys, I was like, hey, dude, remember where you were a year before? You were lying in a pool of blood and you just got the opportunity to be cut by Dallas Cowboys. It was easier to connect to that moment and draw inspiration from it. I find it a little bit harder now as a middle-aged man. I've been through a divorce. I've been through career change. I go through uncertainty every day. We talked about it at the beginning, like friends and people, who's in your life, who's not in your life, what's going on. And I have to remind myself, like, this conversation reminds me, it's like, you went through some shit. Yeah. And look where you are. But sometimes you forget about the shit you go through, like you did too. And look where you are. But I find it sometimes as I'm away from that moment, it takes me a little bit more to get back there and relive it so I can draw that power from it, like I did throughout my football career. Because I wound up playing 16 years. 16 years. I retired at the age of 40 when everyone said, well, you're only going to play, a couple of years. I went from the kid that never played football till the age of 18 to having a 16-year career. I actually got signed 2 years ago during COVID when I was 45 years old. The Calgary Stampeders signed me to play during COVID because they couldn't find anyone. And I didn't suit up for a game, but I was there and I had to try out, and they had stopwatches and they were timing me like I was a kid out of college, and I proved that I could do it then, and I tell everyone, I say, I'm 48 now. I turned 48 in June. I got 2 more years. They can call me until I'm 50. I train like an animal until I'm 50. And then when I'm 50, I'm going to ease off. But I said,
Yeah.
until I'm 50, I'm not retiring.
Well, good on you for sticking in there. But so I'm kind of looking at the whole picture here. Sounds to me like, you had this dream of playing football. You really got into it. You really wanted to succeed at it, even though you had all these doubters in your life. And
Yeah.
then you get to a point where you're kind of questioning your choices. You're like, man, I have this degree. I could do something with it. Why am I sacrificing my body? Why am I, maybe not making as much money as I could be? I don't know how
Yeah.
much CFL players get paid, or,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but and then you go to work and you get stabbed, and then the stabbing is what kind of makes you reevaluate your position, and you decide, I need to go through with this, and then you end up having all these amazing experiences out of it. So
Yeah.
I mean, you took a tragic event and turned it around, and I guess what I'd like to know, because it sounds to me like you just had like a divine intervention, but is that really what happened, like, or did anything click for you?
I feel like that's what it was. I mean, that whole moment and the year that the 300 that night, that day, and the 365 days that passed after that was like, it was unbelievable because like you said, I mean, I was even thinking of quitting that day. I was listening to those voices that day when I was on the field. I was like, come on. And that knife went in and I forgot about everything. It wasn't until I was sitting on the plane the year after I got cut by Jacksonville Jaguars. I was in training camp with the Jaguars. I didn't make the team. They cut me. It was super interesting, and people are gonna freak out when I tell you this story. Um, I was sitting. I was in the airplane flying. I had to connect in Cincinnati. This is crazy. I had to connect in Cincinnati to get back to Montreal.
Mm.
I'm in the plane and I'm thinking about, oh man, like I got cut, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden a little light went off. It's like, hey, wait a second. A year ago, where were you? A year ago, you were lying on the floor. Because it was kind of like I got stabbed in June, but I got cut kind of at the beginning of September. So it was almost a year ago. And I thought about that day. And then I was like, oh shit. That morning, I remember I was going to quit football. It only came back to me about a year and a bit later that day I was going to quit, because from the time I got stabbed, all I was thinking is I got to make it, got to make it, got to make it, got to make it. That's the only mantra in my head was I'm going to make it. And I never like it. Nothing ever like my voice was positive, but it wasn't when I was sitting in that airplane that I thought about that full day that I got stabbed and how I wanted to quit that morning.
Yeah.
Like I didn't remember it until I got cut by the Jaguars. And then I became very grateful. I was like, okay. And I used to journal a bit. I think I still have that journal. And I wrote, I'm going to be back. And it was so funny. This is the crazy, like you talk about divine intervention. I went to church my whole life. I believe in God. I have my own relationship with God, not necessarily follows all the Catholic principles that I was raised with, but I know I have my own experiences with God. And I sat down in this airport. I swear to God, this is no word of a lie. I'm sitting in the airport. I'm like the only person connecting on this flight to go to Montreal in Cincinnati. There's no one in the airport. I'm looking down. I think I was actually journaling in my book. I can't remember. All of a sudden, I look up and there's a guy sitting right next to me. And he's like, hey, my name's Michael. I'm like, hey, how are you? He's like, listen, man. He's like, you're a football player, eh? I'm like, how'd you know? Maybe I was wearing some t-shirt. I couldn't tell why he knew, but he's like, yeah, yeah. I was like, yeah. And I was like, and he's like, yeah. So how come you're in Cincinnati? I said, listen, yeah, I just got cut by Jacksonville. And, I'm going back home to Montreal. I don't know if I'm going to, I don't know what's going to happen. And he said, don't worry. He says, I believe in you. You're going to be here in Cincinnati at some point. He's like, you're going to be here in Cincinnati. I'm like, okay. And I didn't think anything of it. Long story short, I went back to Montreal. The very next day, I signed with the Dallas Cowboys. I played eight games with the Cowboys. Midway through the season, they cut me. We were losing. They were cutting guys left, right, and center. At one point, I was on the chopping block. I was staying in Dallas, and all of a sudden, I got a call from the Cincinnati Bengals. And I went back to that airport, and I was like, holy crap. This is where that guy told me I was going to come back here.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember that until that second where I was walking in the airport. I was like, this seems weirdly familiar. And next thing you know, I'm having this deja vu that this was supposed to happen. So, whether people think it's crazy or not, I really believe in those things in my relationship. I'm not saying that if I pray to God, he's going to make me play football. I know that's not how it works. But I've had some experiences where I feel like my path was altered because of a message that I was given, and then I've made a choice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I don't think it's like, hey, you're gonna go to the NFL, but you still got to make hard choices when your destiny and your path lies in front of you. And I find, again, going away when you get a little bit older, I find it hard to make those choices. Like, I was way more idealistic and way more, yeah, man, I'm gonna jump in the car and go when I was a kid, and now it's like I find I'm a little bit more cautious. I'm trying to reconnect with that though, because I think that's where we slow down as aging adults, as men. We lose that little bit of that dreamer mentality. I'm trying to get that back. That's kind of what my show is, right? Like, like I got the ride with Chevy and Nasty, and me reconnecting with Nasty, Sheldon, the Pastrick, was us going back to our youth and saying, listen, let's do something that makes us excited. We don't know what we're doing. Like I told you, when we do the show, like everyone's like, man, that show was awesome. Sometimes we're like 3 minutes to airtime and we don't know what we're talking about because he's busy with work and life and kids, and I'm busy with work and life and kids. But we've committed to showing up at 11 p.m. every Tuesday night, and what happens after
Yeah.
that. But it's
Yeah.
always been fun. It's always been good, and I always get charged. And I'm trying to take on a few more things like that reconnect me to the spirit that I had when I was young. Like, what can I dream about next? Like, I don't just want to sleep. Like, sleeping is because you're tired, but I also want to dream. If I'm going to go to sleep, I'm going to dream so that when I wake up, I want to step towards that dream. That's kind of what I feel these days. And I'm trying to find that energy, that juice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I know speaking personally, I didn't get to where I am today because I planned it. To me, like
Mm-hmm.
literally the universe basically had to say, okay, this is not what you're meant to be doing. That's like, you're not happy in this situation. So now I'm going to start taking stuff away from you. So first it was, take the house away. Then it was, I had all the financial struggles because I went to school
Yeah.
and all that, and then lost the job. And at the time it was devastating, but it was also kind of like a fresh start, right?
Yeah.
So because I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I had just accepted I'm going to work in the oil sands till I'm 60, 70 years old, and I'm going to retire, and then I'm going to die. And so, I think we get kind of stuck in our routines and in our habits, and we
You
don't
ever
dream, like you said.
you ever walk in an airport? I walked in an airport yesterday. I love people and I observe people, right? And I see a guy driving that little cart, the little beep, 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 beep. And he just drives that cart and he drives people up and down all day.
Yeah.
And then there's a guy pushing a cart, like a luggage thing, and he's all nice dressed in his uniform. And I look at these, and then all the people that are walking in and out of the airport, they all look so unhappy because they're at the airport. And you look at the airport until people actually meet that are hugging at the arrivals. Like, everyone looks unhappy at the airport. You ever notice that? But I always want to ask, like, that guy that drives that stupid little cart, like, is that what you dreamt of doing? Or is that what you settled for? And for me, like, I'm telling you, I wake up every morning and I'm like, I see some people, what they do, and I really feel uh, uh, like, and I'm not saying I have accomplished a lot, but I really feel like I haven't accomplished anything. Like, I haven't done anything good in this life.
Mm.
And that feeling makes me want to do better.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm not tooting my own horn, but I know what my resume is. Like, I played 16 years professional football. I've done stuff for charities like women's cancers, Canadian Cancer Society, domestic violence shelters around Alberta. I've traveled across Canada to do presentations on bullying and bully prevention. I work in the fire department. I've saved lives. I've literally saved lives. I've jumped into fires. I've done CPR. I've brought people back. I've lost lives. I teach. I do fire safety presentations. Like, I think I've done a lot in terms of if I look at it, but I still wake up every morning and say, man, I haven't done shit. Like, I better use the next 50 years of my life to do something good. That's how
Wow.
I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what they call imposter syndrome and stuff, but I'm really trying to find that thing that I'm like, okay, now, like I don't know, it's so stupid. Like, what do you dream of, Guillaume? What do you dream of?
For me,
Yeah.
finding peace and stability for my family, that's the biggest thing. And then after that, it would be just to help humanity, just to be healthier and happier and just get along. That's my thing.
But like, so, and those are great. That's kind of the general overview. But like, if I don't know, like, if I'm saying, what's that selfish dream you have? Like, if, like, for me, when I was a kid, man, I wanted to be a goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens. Like, for me, it's like, oh, if I could be the goaltender for Canadians, I, like, as impossible as that is, that's what I want to be. What's the Guillaume selfish dream?
The
The one that would,
selfish.
yeah, the selfish one, the one that you won't tell anyone because it's impossible.
Oh, my impossible dream is
Yeah,
to
yeah.
collaborate with that guy, man. Elon. That's my impossible dream. I want to like help the future generations because I think we're gonna go to Mars and go to space, and the people we send out there are gonna need mental help. So to me, that's my big ambitious dream that seems far fetched, but it's what I'm aiming at. 'Cause
And
that's
then,
just it.
and so, like, have you taken a step towards that?
Every day, man. Like
That's awesome.
the show is part of it, and then I take coaching. I want to become a coach. I've connected with people who are into healing and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean,
So that's
I,
awesome. I love that you're doing it because
I'm never going to be the expert. I know that I'm not going to be the doctor or the psychiatrist or the researcher, but I want to be the guy who helps kind of link people together and facilitate things and make things happen. I want to be the magic sauce, I guess.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you're taking those steps because that's cool, man. And that's what I'm searching. Like, my podcast is a bit of that. There's like my secret dream. I always said this, like, again, I've never shared this publicly. I've shared it with a couple of friends, but I always said, you ever see that movie Reservoir Dogs?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you like that movie. That's one of my favorite movies, Quentin
I
Tarantino.
think it's okay, but yeah,
I think it's one of my favorite movies. And I always thought that Reservoir Dogs would make an amazing play. Like, because it's set in a warehouse.
yeah, the whole movie's in the warehouse. Yeah,
The whole movie's in the warehouse except a couple of flashback scenes. And I always thought, man, I want to act in that play. And no
who
one
would you
else is
be?
no one else. I don't know who I'd be. I think I'd be Mr. Blonde. I think
Okay.
I'd be Mr. Blonde. But I thought, so my secret dream would be one day to take acting lessons, but also to create this play of Reservoir Dog. It's stupid. But I think if I did that, I'd feel like, man, I accomplished something. And it's dumb. But today I was like, I think I got to start looking into acting classes before I turn 50. My friend Sheldon, my co-host,
Yeah.
Nasty, he just turned 50 on the weekend. So we talked last night. We had our show last night, talked a little bit about, what are you going to do for the next 50 and all those great things you said, like helping people, taking care of our own health to make sure that, we're around for the people we love, doing good things in the world. But it's like, I want to do something that charges me up. And the show charges me up. But like this morning, I woke up, it's like, what, that thing that you keep talking about to yourself that nobody knows about, that's the thing that would charge you up. And I'm like, maybe I'm going to take some acting classes and see if I can get, maybe in acting classes, I'll meet a guy that wants to write a screenplay or a play. And I'll suggest him, hey, listen, man, why don't we do Reservoir Dogs? And he'll be like, man, that's a great idea. Let's do it. But until I take a step, I'm not going to do it. Right. So it's funny because you really got to start thinking about what charges you up. What are the things that you want to do? And that's kind of where I'm at in life. I'm at that stage where my oldest son, he's going off to university next year, which is crazy because I feel like I just held him in my hands yesterday as a baby, but he's
Yeah.
turning 18 in October. He's going to university. My other son's 15. My other son's 13 and is going fast. Yeah, so it's always interesting trying to I guess the barometer of who you are and reinvent yourself, because I knew when I played football it wasn't going to be forever. The average career last 3 years, I just hung on for 16, and I'm still hanging on because I still think the phone's going to ring one day. But then I had to find something else. That's how I became, I got involved in the fire service because I loved helping people. I love being on a team, and I love physical activity. And then, all the community work that you do, that was something that drew me to that profession. And it's a great profession. But even within that, I had to reinvent myself a few years later because, I got divorced. I didn't see my kids because I was working shift work, and I was super comfortable in this fire job. Like, I was made to be a firefighter. Like, I'm the guy that when the dryer's on fire, I could throw it out the building, and then the guy just sprays water on it and we're good. Like, I was awesome. But I had to make a choice. I had to make a hard choice. I was like, listen, I could change careers. I had an opportunity to change into the job I currently am and see my kids more, or remain comfortable but see my kids less. And I did it again. I made another career change. So because I'm confident that things will be all right. Even some of the hard choices, because I've been through that threshold of, I've been through some pretty bad things. On the other side, if you work hard, you do right, things can turn out. And you choose that. Like, the path is there, but you got to choose it and you got to take the steps. And I think that's kind of what I learned, like what resilience means to me is hard stuff's going to come. It's always going to come. And when you're in that moment of like the really darkest part, then you have a choice to make. Do you stay there, stay in the dark, or do you look for the light and start taking those hard steps towards the light? And that's, when we talk about resilience and what you want to talk about, that's kind of what I feel like my life path has taught me so far. And even having this discussion with you tonight kind of reaffirms that for me, because I don't always think about these things. A lot of times I'm just thinking about what the heck am I going to feed my kids for lunch today? What am I going to do for groceries? Where are we going to, like a day like this where I was sitting home alone, anticipating this conversation is good for me, because now here we are. We share some really good ideas.
Yeah. And just kind of to add to what you're saying too, you're talking about taking those steps, right? Like you have those big ambitious goals and you get so far. The more steps you take, the harder it is to quit, because it's hard to give up on all the work you've already done. And you've already got this proof of the work you've put in. So I think just getting started towards anything is the biggest challenge. Once you get started and you pick up momentum, and then that's it. Like things just get easier and easier. And then, you get over the hump.
Especially if you've had a situation like I had where you failed before. I think sometimes I remember I used to go to chapel, and I don't remember the whole story, but there was this girl that was swimming the English Channel, and she was going to get a world record, and she swam the whole thing. And right before she got at the end, she couldn't see the shoreline, and she was like 100 meters from the shore, and all she had to do was swim. And she was swimming for, I don't know how long she was swimming for, but she quit right before the end because she couldn't see it, right? And then she went back years later and did it. But I think about that story, and I think I've already had the moment where whatever I was doing, I could have quit. And then I kept going and I got to the shore. So now the challenge is when I do start something, whether it's my podcast, that it's like, it's hard to commit to getting on every Tuesday night live, and thinking, know how many people listen to my show. I don't know, 5, 10 people, maybe 20. I don't know who listens, but it's definitely not like these big time podcasts. But I'm not going to quit, because I know if you put in that effort, if you put in that work, the good things will pay off. And I've had enough evidence of that through my own experience and through, like, if we call it divine intervention, that things can be all right so long as you choose that positive attitude and you work hard towards your goal.
Yeah.
And you kind of don't listen to the voices of the naysayers, because there's always naysayers, right? That's the first thing people want to do, is cast their failures on you, because they don't have the guts to do what you're doing. How many guys that worked in the oil patch like you are doing this podcast?
Oh, probably none. Yeah,
probably none, right? How many guys that played as long as I did are doing it, my own podcast? Not too many.
Yeah.
So you got to take your courage and your convictions and keep going despite what everyone says. That's why, like, when we got on, and I mean, to go to the beginning, when I said, I noticed you hadn't put out an episode in a while and stuff. I really want to encourage you, because what you're doing is good stuff. No one's doing what you're doing. And if you don't do it, no one else will.
Yeah, for me, it became just a matter of priorities. Like you said, times are tough. Sometimes you got to go make money, and the podcast has to kind of take a back stop. But
yeah, absolutely.
I did enjoy doing this. And, in preparation for relaunching the show and having you come on, I was looking at my older episode, and I can see the progress I've made, just the confidence I've gained, and my skills have, gotten better. My setup's getting better. And I know that there's still room for improvement, but just seeing the progress just gives me that extra confidence that, man, it's just going to keep getting better from here.
Absolutely.
What I mean? Like, as long as I don't quit, it's just going to keep improving. And that's the main thing. So
I remember, like, a month ago, was in May, when we all left the network, right?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a producer on my show. Me and Sheldon, we kind of decided we were going to do it on our own. Man, there was a period, the month of May to middle of June, our shows were terrible. Like, terrible. We didn't have the same software, but we were too cheap to pay anyone, because we didn't have any money coming in. We were too, like, we didn't have the time to spend to figure it out on our own. And our shows were like, the production value was zero. But we said, we're going to show up. We could hit the live. One day we were live on Facebook. We weren't live on YouTube. The other time we were live on YouTube. Not like, it was like if you weren't a good friend of us or someone that showed up because you like listened to us, you were gone. These two clowns, what are they doing? And that was like May into June into July. But where we are now, we got a young kid that's working with us. He's great. He's sharp. We got a good group of loyal listeners, and we're building, right? And that's the thing. Like, there was a while there we were looking up, then we went down. Like, progress is not always linear. Like, even my football career, when I look back, I didn't say, hey, I'm playing football, and then I jumped up like this. I went up, I went down. I didn't talk about it. I got in a car crash 3 days before training camp in my third year at McGill. I broke my ribs. I wasn't even supposed to be playing that year. And then I got up. And then 2 years later, I get stabbed. Then I go down. Then I'm on the top of the world. I get drafted to the NFL. And then I get cut. Then I'm in an airplane flying home back to mom doing my laundry. Then I'm back in the NFL. Then I got cut in the middle of the season. Boom, 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 boom. And then you look back and you're like, man, I did pretty good. I got pretty high for a guy that got knocked out a few times, right? And you got to look at it. And what is it? Kenny Rogers says you got to know when to fold him, know when to hold him, right? But he said, don't count the money until the dealing's done. And as long as we're alive and breathing and have something to work for towards, the dealing's still going, man. We're still dealing every day.
Wow. That's a great way to put it, man. And I don't know, we're over an hour. So what do you think? You should wrap it up or what?
I promised you something.
On
our show, we do a little thing we call 300-pound poetry. And I did it for years, 300-pound poetry. Back when Sheldon and I, we used to have a radio show on Calgary Sports. And what we did was a little recap of the week's sporting events. And we always have fun with it. We call it 300-pound poetry. But really, I do love poetry. And, this week, kind of wrap a couple of things up. I lost a buddy, fire captain, a good friend of mine, Lloyd Wire, great guy, 57 years old. They found him in his sleep. I worked with him very much. He loved rock music. He loved Conan the Barbarian. He loved comic books. He loved Superman. He was like just an awesome dude. And, we'll talk about Jasper, but I don't think we'll talk about that. But lots going on with wildfires, obviously, and I want a little tribute to my brothers and sisters in the fire service. We talk about mental health. We talk about physical health. We talk about taking care of ourselves. And people in the police, the fire, military, for me, they're real life superheroes, and I wrote a poem a little while back about mental health and resilience. And, I don't often do this because I do get shy, but I'm really comfortable, and your show is the right spot for it. So with your permission, would it be okay to read a serious poem about resilience and mental health and all that? Would that be cool?
Absolutely, man. I want to hear it.
Okay. So this poem is called Superman's Pain. All right. Does Superman ever sleep after a hard day, fighting crime and the villains in his way? Can he even rest after a long day is done? Can he appreciate the heat of the earth's warm, glowing sun? When he closes his eyes, will he see how he again saved the day? Or will he only see back issues of the bad guys that got away? Does he dream hopefully and vividly of the world he wants to help create? Or rather crypto nightmares of darkness and hate? Does he sit lonely in his fortress, lamenting the pain of the victims he could not save while he was out with Lois Lane? Can he even remember the citizens he's flown home? Or are they all nameless faces he'll not remember, forever unknown? A Justice League and Super Friends, he leads without fear, but when the last pages turn, they all seem to disappear. He has charisma and power, speed and strength, but maybe his greatest gift is keeping friends at arm's length. But his villains and demons return, more so than his friends. He repeatedly meets them, a battle without end. His cape bright red, and maybe just as well, it masks all the stains of his blood, sadness, and hell. He stands tall and proud, still wears the colors with pride. You couldn't get him to admit weakness, to mask it, he'd lie. And when he looks in the mirror, does he see Kal-El or Clark? Or just an endless battle between light and the dark? But our world still needs him, his worth and his soul. Without it, there'd be a supersized hole.
That's deep, man. You wrote that?
Yeah, man.
Well, with those skills to pay the bills, I think your
Yeah.
play's going to make it to Broadway, man. You're going to have Reservoir Dogs on Broadway with Randy Chevrier.
You never know. You never know, Mr. Blonde. You know, I'll need a supporting cast. But no, man, I appreciate the platform. Like I said, you know, I'm one of those guys that really wishes success for people. As much as I try to carve out my niche, when I see people trying something that's different, that's exciting, I want, like, you know, there's some people when you look on social media, you know, they're like, oh, look at this guy, he's doing this thing again. You know, you hear it, you hear the whispers. And then there's people like me, like, I don't care if I haven't spoken to you in 2 years. If I see you got a new dog, I'll be like, hey man, that's awesome. Or you're starting a new project. You're like, I'm all in. Like, I'm all in for people's success, because I think that's the only way we make this world better, this community better, is inspiring people to try great things.
Yeah.
Because it might not be my great. Like, I've said it to you. I said, listen, I know nothing about mushrooms and transcendental meditation and a lot of the stuff. I know nothing about it, but I'm interested as heck, and I think you do a great job covering it.
Yeah.
And I want to learn more. And if I want to come and learn somewhere, I'm going to learn through you. You know what I mean? And you probably don't give a crap about football or the CFL. But if you do want to check it out sometime, you're going to come and ask me, right? And that's what I think. Like, I'm just a big fan of yours, man, and I really appreciate that you gave me an opportunity to come and share with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on, sharing your story. And so where can people find out about more about you? You've got the ride with Chev and Nasty.
Yeah, so our podcast, The Ride with Chevy and Nasty, you can look us up on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all that. It's at Chevy and Nasty. Our show is on YouTube. We're also now finally, like, we're evolving. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's The Ride with Chevy and Nasty. So we go live every Tuesday night from 11 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and we got a loyal following of guys that come on. They stay up late with us. They put in comments. You've been on several times. Sometimes we go to overtime. So Sheldon doesn't like finishing past midnight, but we often do, because we just have so much to talk about. We're not pros, right? So we're authentic. We're grassroots. We have fun. You know, we interact with the people that interact with us. And then for me personally, you know, I'm at Randy Chevrier. You know, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I don't use it too much, but yeah, like, yeah, that's about all I got going on now. You know, like I said, busy with the fire department, lots going on with kids and schools and stuff. And yeah, it's I enjoyed my job. I'm very fulfilled, and I'm very fulfilled meeting and chatting with you. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing right now.
Nice. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you coming on, man.
Thanks, brother. Keep
All right,
doing your
Randy.
good work.
Okay, take care. All right, Trippers. Well, we just heard from Randy Chevrier and his story of resilience. Very grateful for Randy coming on and sharing that story with us. I want to do something a little different with the show compared to previous episodes. I kind of want to share some clips with you guys, things that I find online, you know, other podcasts, research, TED Talks, things like that. Because I feel like my main role, I'm never going to be the expert on this show. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a doctor. I'm not, you know, I'm just a tradesman. I'm just an average guy like you guys. So I feel like the best thing I can do is really share the things that resonate with me, and hopefully it resonates with you. So we're on the topic of resilience, and a few months back, Andrew Huberman dropped this podcast with David Goggins, and they talk about resilience. And what I found really interesting about that episode is that Andrew Huberman talks about I'm going to screw that up, how it's called, the anterior mid-singular cortex. So there's actually basically a part of your brain that he calls the source of willpower in a person. That's where you can build willpower. And Andrew describes perfectly how that works. So I wanted to share that with you. I don't know the whole copyrighted thing. This is still something I'm trying to figure out as a new podcaster. Like, can I share these videos and not get in trouble? But I guess we're going to find out. I'm going to play it. If it gets pulled, we'll learn. Here we go. So this is Andrew Huberman talking to David Goggins on Huberman Lab about the anterior mid-singular cortex.
How do you build your will? Exactly what you said, man. Exactly what you said.
Well, I feel like knowing the name of something, anterior mid-cingulate cortex, doesn't fundamentally change us. But one thing I like about biology, is that willpower, if somebody feels they don't have it, feels like this thing that other people have, but everybody, unless they're brain damaged, like a hole through their head, has two anterior mid-cingulate cortex, one on each side of their brain. Everyone has one. They have two. So I feel like it's just a question of opening the portal. And the portal, I've going to say 10 times and forgive me, is I think people go, oh, I do hard things. I do sets to failure, and then I do forced reps. I love training with weights. I love doing sets to failure. I even like forced reps. But guess what? I like forced reps. So I'll tell you, they don't build my anterior mid-cingulate cortex. Because I like to do it.
That's right.
Anything you like to do is not going to enhance this aspect of willpower. And it seems so obvious once you hear it. You kind of go, oh yeah, of course. But I think you really close that loop for people when you share what you're sharing today and what you've shared elsewhere before as well, when you're trying to explain the friction is the critical ingredient.
Right. So I love what he's saying is that there's actually a way to build willpower and, in a sense, build resilience. And that's in doing things that you don't enjoy. And I know that doesn't sound appealing. It sounds like crap, but just face it. Like, how else are you going to develop resilience? It's by doing the things that you have to push yourself to do and to develop. So yeah, I thought that was great. There's actually a way to develop resilience, kind of like a muscle. You just have to put effort, and it's something you can work towards. It's just a matter of doing things that you don't enjoy doing. And like Mike Tyson would say, you have to do the things you don't like, but do them like you love them. And that's how you get that willpower. Right. So this next video is a TED Talk by Rick Doblin, who's talking on the benefits of psychedelics. And if you're not familiar with who Rick Doblin is, he's the founder of MAPS. It's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And they're basically figuring out how psychedelics can help with things like mental health, PTSD, depression, even things like alcoholism. I think they're even studying like autism, things like that. So there seems to be a lot of potential for psychedelics. And Harry just gives a little blurb about it. So I wanted to share that with you guys. If I can find there we go. We're back. Here we go.
Psychedelic psychotherapy is showing great promise for the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, depression, social anxiety, substance abuse, and alcoholism, and suicide. Psychedelic psychotherapy is an attempt to go after the root causes of the problems with just a relatively few administrations, as contrasted to most of the psychiatric drugs used today that are mostly just reducing symptoms and are meant to be taken on a daily basis.
So Rick brings up two good points here that I want to address. And the first one is that based on the research that's been going on so far, psychedelics can address the root cause of the issue, not just address the downstream symptoms. You know, like, for example, you have a headache, you take an aspirin. Okay, well, the aspirin will make your headache feel better, but you're still not dealing with what caused the headache in the first place, right? Same with anxiety. You can take medication, it'll alter your mood, it'll make you feel less anxious, but it's not addressing why you're anxious in the first place. With psychedelics, if you're seeing a professional, I've never had the opportunity to actually have a psychedelic assisted therapy, but with the aid of a psychiatrist or somebody who's trained in administering psychedelics and kind of guiding you through it, you can really address the root cause of the issue. And that leads into the second thing that he says that I like is pharmaceuticals you tend to have to take every day, right? Psychedelics, some people, they take it once and it changes their life and they're good. Some people have to do it every few months, but the point is it's not something that you're depending on for the rest of your life. It's like I said, it's addressing the cause issues. This is another part here of the same TED Talk by Rick. And I'm going to show you this and we'll talk about this too.
Science research has demonstrated that psychedelics reduce activity in what's known as the brain's default mode network. This is where we create our sense of self. It's our equivalent to the ego, and it filters all incoming information according to our personal needs and priorities. When activity is reduced in the default mode network, our ego shifts from the foreground to the background, and we see that it's just part of a larger field of awareness. It's similar to the shift that Copernicus and Galileo were able to produce in humanity using the telescope to show that the Earth was no longer the center of the universe, but was actually something that revolved around the sun, something bigger than itself. For some people, this shift in awareness is the most important and among the most important experiences of their lives. They feel more connected to the world bigger than themselves. They feel more altruistic, and they lose some of their fear of death.
So I shared this clip because one thing that he says that really resonates with me is that when people take psychedelics, they tend to have this awareness, like this shift of perspective, and they become bigger than themselves, right? So for me, when I first started experiencing psychedelics, I kind of started to live life a little less on autopilot. I became a little bit more intentional because I became more aware of what was going on around me. I was able to also put myself in other people's shoes. Like I would reflect on past events or past interactions I've had with people, and I would reflect on, oh, maybe I could have said something better. I could have acted nicer. I could have, you know what I mean? I was able to see things on a bigger scope than just having my blinders on and focused on my day-to-day, my own life. And having that perspective, this awareness, not only gives you, I find, better control on your life, but it gives you a bigger view of how things work. And I don't know, it's easier to see other options as opposed to just be so closed up with your own personal beliefs. On the topic of resilience still, I want to share this last clip with you. And this is Michael Caine, great British actor. I remember him mostly for being Alfred in Batman. But here Michael Caine shares a little story about using the difficulty. And this goes hand in hand with resilience. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So here's Michael Caine.
Fall over it. If it's a drama, pick it up and smash it.
Oh, I forgot to rewind it. Start over.
And finally, I came across a line which I just wanted you to sort of explain to me. You said that if you did have one philosophy of life, it was use the difficulty.
Yes, use the difficulty.
What does that mean?
Well, I got it from, I was rehearsing a play when I was a very young actor, and I had to come in this scene. It was a stage play. I'm behind the flats, waiting to open the door. There was an improvised scene between a husband and wife going on inside. And then they got carried away, and they started throwing things, and he threw a chair, and it lodged in the doorway. And I went to open the door, and I just got my head round, and I said, "I'm sorry, sir, I can't get in." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "There's a chair there." He said to me, "Use the difficulty." I said, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, if it's a comedy, fall over it. If it's a drama, pick it up and smash it." He said, "Use the difficulty." Now, I took that into my own life. You ask my children. They say, directly, anything bad happens, they go, "We've got to use the difficulty. How can we work? What can we get out of this? You know? Use the difficulty." And so there's never anything so bad that you cannot use that difficulty. If you can use it 0.25% to your advantage, you're ahead. You didn't let it get you down. You know? That's my philosophy. Use the difficulty. Also, added philosophy is avoid them if you can. At all costs.
So what I love about this video is it kind of shows how Michael Caine, you know, being this actor, getting ready to go on stage, he had a view of how things were going to play out. You know, he was going to walk through the door and enter the scene. But unexpectedly, this chair got lodged in the door, and then he just didn't know how to move forward. He kind of got stuck. And then the director tells him, well, you know, use the difficulty. If it's comedy, trip over the chair. If it's a drama, smash the chair. And I love that perspective. You know, I've been reading, 2 books I've been reading is The Power of Now. And one of the things that Eckhart Tolle says in that book is, you know, there are no problems, only situations. So essentially, you know, when you're faced with something, your view on it determines if it's a positive or a negative, right? What's presented to you often is neither. It's just part of life. And you have the power to choose, okay, is this going to be an obstacle, or is this going to be just a challenge that I have to face and get over, and I'm not going to let it stop me from, getting to my goals. And that goes hand in hand with, let's see, this book here, The Obstacle is the Way, right? So you're faced with an obstacle, you can say, okay, well, I'm just going to turn around and tuck my tail between my legs and walk home. Or you can just accept that the obstacle is just part of the journey. It's part of the path. And you either, you can go around it, you can go over it, you can smash through it, whatever, but don't let it, stop you from moving forward. The obstacle becomes the way. Use the difficulty, and there are no problems, only situations. So yeah, that kind of wraps up my 14th episode of Tripping Through Transformation. I've been on hiatus for a little while. Thought I'd come back, do something a little different, give it a try, see how that goes. Thank you to those who have been with me since the first episode. I hope you can see the progress that I've made, not just, as a presenter, a podcaster, just the confidence, getting better at being on camera, talking and sharing things, editing, all that stuff. That's all part of the journey, man. There's this post that I love. It says your first of anything will always suck. Your first podcast, your first workout, your first speech will always be bad, but you can't get to your 100th without doing your first. So put aside your ego and just get started. And that's what I'm doing. Trust me, when I think about this, when I think about it, I'm like, man, my podcast probably not all that good. It could probably be better in this area, this aspect. Maybe I'm talking too fast. Maybe I'm mumbling my words, stumbling over my words. But the fact is, I'm never going to get better unless I do it. So for those of you who are supporting me, I really appreciate it. You're helping me grow a lot. And that's the point. I want to build a community to support everyone. I want to share things that are appealing to people, that can help them in their lives, whether it's overcoming adversity, finding happiness, finding connections, meeting with people, just whatever. I just want everybody to be happy and live harmoniously and collaborate. So that wraps up episode 14. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. I appreciate you.